And I just found it interesting that you were applying that sort of concept to growing a firm to the place where it can be sold, because the advice that gets given a lot for agencies, particularly, not necessarily for consultancies, but for agencies, you have to be able to have a repeatable business model in order to drive down costs. You could talk about that just a little bit.
That's a really intelligent question. Okay, so you're completely right when it comes to that product or that service. So ideally, don't get me wrong, there are companies that haven't commodified, that haven't systematized, that have also sold. So Water Street Partners is a very good example of this, merger and acquisition consultancy. The knowns, as you say, and focus is bright people, investing in people and being innovative and creative with their solutions. They sold very successfully to, I think, McKinsey, I can't remember. But for the most part, yes, the advice is standardize, commodify, systematize. And that is true, give or take. There's two things I would say to that. Firstly, strategically, you don't want to lose that innovation that boutiques or agencies have. One of the reasons why clients come to boutiques rather than going to the Big Four or McKinsey, Bain, Boston is because they're not getting that innovation from McKinsey, Bain, Boston anymore. And so they come to boutiques because the people are more, they don't have that baggage or bureaucracy and climb up the ladder and systematizing things. The other thing is to say, from the CEO's perspective, you may well have 1, 2, or 3 products that you get to a commodified or systematized state, and that's fantastic. But there are several things that mean that you can't rely on that entirely. The first is that the markets are always changing, and if you don't change your products and services with the markets, you're going to get left behind. And that's especially true in the consulting industry, where, you know, what was TQM became lean, what was lean became agile, what was agile became something else. And the second thing is that with smaller firms that are growing, you really can't make that jump too quickly. So if you go directly to commodified services, you may well be commodifying the wrong thing. So there's this really important growth phase where you're really working out what type of company you are and what services provide high growth, high margin, and also enjoy doing them. And if you don't spend sufficient time doing that, then you're probably going to scale the wrong stuff.
That's pretty interesting, because, of course, the question then becomes, typically, in general, maybe as a generalization, how long does that phase tend to last?
That's another really good question. So I would say it typically lasts about 5 years, but it should last a bit longer. So I think a lot of consultancies focus on, so let's imagine I leave Deloitte, I'm a great change manager for the automotive industry. I leave, I start doing change management for the automotive industry because it's what I know, it's where my clients are. Great, okay, so I'm making 50% gross, I'm making 15% net. Because I've got those connections, I'm doing pretty well. Now, once you start to grow, I'm generalizing here, but 2 things typically happen. One is that you need to feed the beast, and the founder can't do that, so you need to go beyond your own connections. But number 2, those who started off by giving you projects because they knew you and liked you and wanted to give you a bit of luck when you were starting off, they start to fall away. So you've got this 2 to 3 year period where, you know, you're in the money and you're thinking, this is great. All I need to do is commodify what I'm doing and sell, and I'm done. 5-year plan. But a lot of founders forget that drops off, and that they need people who can sell. And very often the margins will drop off as well as a part of that, because they need to be more competitive because they're competing with bigger players. At that stage, I often get called in, and my initial question is, are you selling the right stuff? And they say, of course, we've got a reputation in this. I'm one of the best experts in the world. But perhaps instead of doing change management in the automotive industry, you could be doing change management in the banking industry and double your margins. Or you could call it agile in the banking industry and treble your margins. Or there's a specific thing that you're doing that's high margin and high growth, and you're not plowing money and people into it because you've got your security blanket of what you always used to do. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that if you think you are going to scale what you have always done, you might be right, but in my experience, the odds are you're probably going to be wrong and that you're going to miss some really important opportunities.
I think that's actually really interesting because I'm reflecting on my own sort of journey as I left corporate world, started up my own business and worked my way through. And one of the biggest surprises to me was that you do actually change and pivot as you learn and grow your way through this world of consulting and all the different aspects that go with it. So if I'm interested in what you were saying about, you asked the question, are you selling the right stuff? How do people figure out what if they should be selling, if what they're selling isn't necessarily the right stuff?
So this comes back to traditional but good market research. So talking to your clients, doing some market research, what are the growth areas, what's the highest margin work, looking at the competitors. But I'm sure you've had the same experience. It really amazes me how I've got 4 clients that I'm on the board of. And the first thing I say when I join is, where's the client advisor? They'll have 3 people like me who have grown and sold companies or are experts in growth, but they won't have any clients there. And what you need to do is to talk to your clients all the time. And I don't just mean sending them a questionnaire saying, how good was this project? Inviting them into the office, having them on the board, having get-togethers and lunches where you discuss the trends, the emergent trends, what problems they really need solving. And then you start to explore that as potential services rather than what you've done perhaps successfully over the last 5 years. I'm not saying that there aren't really important, valuable, profitable things that you've done in your past that will continue to sell in the future. But I am saying that unless you have that period of experimentation, you may well find that you're on the top of the S-curve of market growth and you're selling TQM and BPR when everyone's moving on to something else.